Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings opens in theaters this week, and joining me now is the one and only Simu. Welcome to Here and Now.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, so I live in Los Angeles, and I'm not
Mhm.
exaggerating. You can't go a block without seeing your face on a billboard for this movie. How does that feel?
It feels a little weird, a little strange. I mean, I'm sure if you would have asked me, 7 or 8 years ago when I was first starting out as an actor, I'd tell you that this is all I've ever wanted. But yeah, I do find myself strangely anxious whenever I see have you seen the massive one on Sunset? It
I
is
have, yes.
terrifying. It's just terrifyingly large. I mean,
You
it's
turn the
obvious.
corner and say, "That's my face." Oh my
That is
God.
my face. It's like 12, it's my 12-foot face blown up on a ridiculous degree. But no, I think I'm really aware of just how few faces I've seen, over history or over my life that have looked like me on movie posters. And so, that's not lost on me. And I know that the representation, of course, is important and meaningful. I just can't get used to it.
Yeah. Well, you've got some time to get used to it because once folks get to see this movie, you'll be hit with that head on. But I
Oh
want
yeah.
to talk a little bit more about representation because Simo, you kind of manifested this role for yourself. You actually tweeted to Marvel back in 2014 asking them when we'd ever have an Asian American superhero, and now you are that superhero.
Yeah, yeah. That's my real superpower is I can actually see into the future. So my stock picks are on point and I'm looking forward I mean, no, I mean, when I made those tweets, I made them to what, like 27 followers or something. I really feel like nobody ever, certainly nobody from Marvel ever read those tweets. But I think what was important for me was I was never afraid to vocalize what I wanted or vocalize my dreams, and that was more for myself than anybody else to hear. I feel like so often, we have these dreams and ambitions within us, and we kill them before we ever get to say them out loud because we judge them, right? We say they're unrealistic, we say they're improbable, we say they're ridiculous. And so, we never allow ourselves to believe that we can do it. But I do feel like everyone has something within them that they've always, that they've always wanted to try and pursue. And I think they should just vocalize it and give themselves the permission to want those things.
Right. And for you, acting was this thing that you had been thinking about for a long time, but it was
Mhm.
up against your own personal life and your family. As I mentioned, there are parts of this storyline that track with your own personal life. A little background: you were raised by your grandparents, right, for the first 5 years of your life, while your
Mhm.
parents were in grad school in Canada. And when you and your parents reunited, you felt this pressure and resentment to live up to their expectations, which you understood not to be your own. You were actually an
Yes.
accountant before you went into acting.
I was a very, very bad one.
Is
I
there a
grad.
such thing? You're either good with
Oh my
numbers
God.
or you're
Oh yes.
not.
You can talk to my old managers and they will tell you there absolutely is such a thing. Yeah, I mean, I went to school for finance and accounting in college. I was basically just following, I feel like, a path that had been more or less prescribed for me. I you know was raised by a couple of very academic parents who were electrical engineers, and they wanted me to follow in their footsteps, which I adamantly refused. And then they said, well, you have to choose some, I just, one of the other approved paths, and business and finance ended up being the one for me, or at least the one that I thought would be the right fit, because I liked money, and I thought maybe if I put on a really expensive suit and went to work every day, then I would be happy. But of course, that is the foolishness of an 18-year-old trying to figure out what to do with his life, but not having any real idea. So yeah, I remember showing up for work on the first day and just feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I've like trapped myself in this place for God knows how long. I mean, thing with entering the job force, or the real world, is there's no semesters, there's no summer break. You can't just hit reset at the end of the year. There's just no end to it, and that was really terrifying. So thankfully, I actually got laid off
It was a
eight
gift to get
months
laid
in.
off, although it probably didn't feel like it at the time.
Yeah, it was an absolute blessing. No, it felt terrible at the time. I remember getting called into my partner's office and having the lady from HR beside him and the guy from security beside her and being given 15 minutes to kind of collect all my things and leave the building. And I just remember walking out in my office and it just being dead quiet. You could hear a pin drop because everybody knew what was happening, but nobody wanted to make eye contact with me. Nobody wanted to acknowledge it. Everyone was just super glued to their work. And I remember just grabbing my things in total silence and then leaving. And so, yeah, it might surprise you to know that I don't really keep in touch with anybody from that office.
There are folks in that office that are saying, "I always knew."
Oh
I'm
man.
sure. I'm sure.
Well, they
Well,
would have known something I didn't for sure.
right at the time, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about this movie and representation in this movie. There are some subtle but powerful messages about identity and the choices we make to assimilate. And here's a
Mhm.
funny scene we're going to play of you and Aquafina, who plays your best friend. Let's listen.
Shang,
Yeah,
you changed your name from Shang to Sean.
yeah, I don't.
I wonder how
Yeah,
I wonder how your father found
okay.
you.
I was 15 years old. All right.
What is your name change logic? You go into hiding
Okay.
and your name is Michael, you come on change it to Michael.
That's not what happened.
It's like, hi, my name's Gina. I'm gonna go into hiding. My new name is Gina.
On a serious note, though, I mean, your character is forced to come to terms with his heritage, and through that, a superhero is born. Have you had experiences like this in your own life where it was easier to just put away parts of yourself in order to blend in?
Yeah, that was certainly what I wanted. I mean, I was never a superhero, so I can't quite speak to that. But when I was little, I feel like there were definitely moments where I wished that I could hide my Asianness. You know, I remember my parents packing me lunches and me getting made fun of when I brought those lunches to school because the other kids thought that they were smelly and that they were stinky and just other little things, whether you want to call them microaggressions or things that are more overt, just kind of making me feel like I didn't belong and like I was other and that part of me was actually was less than. And so, yeah, I mean, I think growing up, I saw my identity as something to be ashamed of. And so I always tried really, really hard to assimilate, which you can imagine is pretty difficult because my name is Simu and most people actually have a lot of trouble pronouncing it or they act like they've never heard it before, which is so strange. No, I mean, obviously it's a very rare name,
Do you
but
say
yeah,
it's just how it's spelled? Okay, is that how?
yeah,
Is
it's
that,
just how it's spelled. It's Simu.
yeah.
And it yeah, it really wasn't until I'd gotten involved in the arts that I started having these conversations about representation that I started to realize all of the ways in which we are conditioned to think this way by the media. And when I used to turn on the TV when I was little, the Asian characters that I saw reflected back at me were very stereotyped. I think they were characters created through a predominantly white gaze, and that meant that oftentimes they were caricatures and they were just not real people. And so I think it really impacted my sense of self-worth and self-confidence and also self-image. And yeah, yeah, I just feel like over the course of I was on a show called Kim's Convenience for many seasons, but over the course of filming that show and really just delving into what it was like growing up in immigrant households and talking to so many other people that had gone through the same, it really just became apparent to me that this was something that we needed to fight for.
I want to talk to you more about Ken's Convenience, but speaking of stereotypes, the actual original comics
Hmm.
for Shang-Chi had a number of stereotypes. Shang-Chi's father, for instance, was
Hmm.
Fu Manchu. How much were you able to contribute to changing those stereotypes within this storyline?
Well, that was the meeting from day one. I mean, I was asked to come in and kind of ask any questions that I had, and one of the very first questions was, "What are you going to do about the stereotypes? What are you going to do about Fu Manchu? How much are we going to adhere to those comic books from the 1970s, which honestly were pretty dated?" as you mentioned, pretty stereotypical. And the answer that I got back from very thoughtful producers and our incredibly thoughtful director, Destin Daniel Cretton, was we're gonna just kind of scrap what doesn't work and build a whole new story around what we want, which is an all new character with an all new backstory and an all new father figure that is not in any way, shape, or form Fu Manchu. And I'm sure if it was anything close to what that character was or stood for, a cinema legend like Tony Leung would never in a million years sign on to do it. So
Mhm.
yeah, I knew from the beginning that was very much top of mind for them. And thankfully we were able to kind of refresh that story for 2021.
Simu, I took my 8-year-old son to the screening of this movie, and afterwards he immediately asked to take martial arts classes. And as we were leaving the theater, I know, right? As we were leaving the theater, I heard a group. He's going to take them, by the way. But as
Oh
we were
wow,
leaving,
okay.
yeah, why not? Of course. Um, but as we were leaving the theater, I also heard a group of women fawning over just how attractive you are. And to me, this speaks to another level of representation. Yes, it is vitally important for Asian Americans to see themselves in media, and also something as simple as seeing an Asian American man in a lead role allows society to see Asian men as powerful and desirable and an aspiration of possibility.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if that's how you see it.
I mean, I makes me a little makes me blush a little bit hearing it. But I think my experiences as an Asian man have been that, I've never seen myself, nor have I been seen as, I think, someone who is desirable or aspirational, as you say, growing up. It just wasn't reflected on screen, and again, just turning on the TV, I saw frequently, Asian characters that were nerds or sidekicks and never really, seen as desirable. I don't think it's the only problem that our community faces. I think Asian women face the opposite side of a similar coin, which is that they are hypersexualized and fetishized and reduced to kind of these sexual stereotypes. And even though on the surface it might seem like they're opposite problems, they're really rooted in the same thing, which is that our narratives have not been under our control. I mean, these characters, these Asian characters that have been portrayed, are not written by Asian screenwriters, and so they're extremely polarized and very, very reductive. And I think the path to reclamation for Asian men is very similar to that same path for Asian women. And our problems are kind of always inexorably linked together. And so in order to kind of defeat them and defeat this kind of white supremacist gaze, we need to work together.
I follow you on Insta, and you recently posted some of your training, your practice, and underneath you wrote, Asian actors don't just do kung fu, but Shang-Chi does. It's one of the many things that flesh out his personality, but it's easily the most challenging. Can you say more about this fraught relationship with Asian Americans, particularly men, with martial
Mhm.
arts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, martial arts has been kind of the one, and I'm gonna use air quotes on this, quote unquote positive stereotype associated with Asian men. And you know, it- I think when kung fu or martial arts kind of first burst onto the scene in the 1970s and kind of swept through the nation, and we had the Bruce Lee action sequences were first introduced to the world. I think it was really, I think the West became very fascinated by it and wanted more. But in a way, in the same way that Bruce Lee empowered a generation of Asian men, he also created, of course, not wasn't his intention certainly, but created this sort of stereotype that then
Mm.
endured for many years, which is all Asian men know martial arts. And I think the way that it's become kind of reductive is that it's limited, what I think Asian men are seen as today. And I remember when I was just starting out and auditioning for Asian characters, it was like every other character I played was some version of a martial artist. And so, you know, I was caught between thinking, well, isn't any representation positive representation? Isn't being seen better than not being seen? But then, you know, also wondering, well, isn't there more than just martial arts? I was not, you know, I didn't study martial arts every day as a kid. I wouldn't consider myself you know, a trained martial artist by any means. You know, that was something that I learned over the course of booking this role and preparing to shoot and delving into the character. But you know, I wonder how much of an assumption it is for people to think, oh, well, if you're an Asian actor, you have to know martial arts,
Hmm.
you know, because otherwise, what else? What other use do you have? I feel like is the underlying question. And so, as much as I think, you know, this is an incredibly empowering movie for Asian people and Asian Americans everywhere, I also hope that the idea that Asians and martial arts are always linked together will eventually be challenged and overthrown.
Mm. You do some amazing fighting in this movie, Simu. I mean, but when we first see you though, you look like an ordinary guy. Well, I should say a regular guy in spectacular shape. But one major difference between you and the other Marvel superheroes is that you're not all muscle and brute. Can you talk a little bit about the training? What was it like?
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It was really important to build strength, of course, and build muscle because we knew, you know, this was a Marvel movie. We have to, you know, put our best foot forward here. But we knew that we couldn't do it in a way that sacrificed what was most important about this character, which is the range of movement, which is the explosiveness and the speed um, at which he disposes of the many bad guys over the course of the movie. So it was really about like a lot of, you know, contrast training, a lot of dynamic exercises. We couldn't really just lift heavy because then that would just be kind of adding on the size and not really doing anything else. On top of that, you know, I rehearsed with the stunt team 5-6 hours a day, 5 days a week in the months leading up to starting our production because, you know, quite frankly, and I mentioned this to you before, my martial arts just wasn't quite where you know it was supposed to be in the beginning of the kind of preparation process. I mean, Shang-Chi, you're talking about one of the best hand-to-hand fighters on
Yeah.
earth, and I, Simu, you know, frequently almost broke his neck trying to backflip in his backyard. So that was the kind of the discrepancy in the skill level that we had to close. And
Wait,
yeah,
did
you
you
know,
do your own fighting? All of it? Were there doubles at all?
I did as much as I could. I mean, we brought an extremely talented team of doubles and performers from all over the world, and many of them were you know, professional athletes. They were national, you know, wushu or martial arts champions. But you know, I never said no. So if I was asked to do a shot, every shot that I could do, I did, and even fought for some of the ones that I originally wasn't supposed to. So very, very, very proud of where, you know, that we ended up in the movie, and I'm happy to say that I gave everything I had.
Well, I have a couple of questions for you about it, but
Okay.
I'm not going to spoil it for people. The very specific scenes, I'll just say the bus scene. Oh my
Mm,
gosh, right? Incredible. You mentioned Tony Leung, who is a legend. I mean, he's a legend in cinema, and he
mhm.
plays your father, and Michelle Yeoh, who plays your aunt. How surreal was it to work with them in this way, and what did you learn from them?
It was incredibly surreal. I was very nervous meeting them for the first time. I remember, you know, walking up to Michelle with a bottle of wine because I heard that she liked wine, and I was like stumbling through an introduction. I was like, "Hello, my name is Simu. I'm so very honored to have you here." And she, you know, grabbed the wine, put it away, wrapped me up in a big hug, and said, "We're gonna have so much fun here. Relax. You know, this is your moment to shine." And really just spoke to her ability to light up, you know, people and light up any room that she walked into. She was just so radiant, And I think in Michelle, I saw a looseness that I really, really wanted to emulate, especially because I think I put a lot of pressure on myself, you know, leading up to the movie. I knew that I wanted to do well for so many reasons. Of course, it was my first, you know, major Hollywood picture, and I was in the lead role. So I had so much I felt like I needed to prove to Destin, our director, to our producers, to everyone. And Michelle just did a wonderful job of loosening me up and just letting me relax into it and find the joy in just playing and, you know,
Mm,
making mistakes and trying new things.
mhm.
And Tony, I think, very similarly, I think, taught me the value of stillness. I mean, from the moment that I met him, I knew that he was a man of very few words, but that didn't mean that he wasn't also incredibly kind and gentle and friendly. He just, you know, his eyes said so much, and he never said more than he needed to, which I always really appreciated. And I think it lends itself very well to his acting style. I mean, he is so expressive and so nonverbal in his performances. He
Yeah, I
says so
heard you
much.
say his eyes, like you
His
learn just by
eyes,
looking at his eyes.
absolutely, you know, such a well of emotion, and they're so rich. And you know, just being able to first of all stare into those eyes, you know, take after take as we did our scenes together was just absolutely incredible and so educational. But also, yeah, he, you know, forced me to like really ground myself and to kind of push all my anxiety out of my body and just sink in and be still.
Simu, you are now part of the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic
Hmm.
Universe. This is huge, which means we know that the story is just beginning, which really means that your career, in many ways, is just beginning. How significant is it for you? Have you really um, sat with this idea that, like, it's really just beginning for you? You've come a long way from that tweet to Marvel asking, when are they going to have someone like you in the lead?
Yeah, I think there is a sense that you know, I'm in a time of great flux in my life. I'm just saying to my friend the other day, I feel like every 2 or 3 months, everything in my life just turns on its head. What I thought was true, or you know, where I thought I was in the industry, would completely shift, and something would happen. And it's just been happening so consistently. It's like double time in the last couple of weeks since the premiere of the movie. And of course, we've then since gone out on the road with it. We've done press. We're in the middle of the press tour, and it just feels like life is moving faster than I can comprehend and keep up with. I mean, even just leaving the hotel and having, you know, the fans and the autograph seekers and the paparazzi for the first time, and dealing with it, and you know, realizing that that's going to be a part of my life. I mean, it's really, yeah, it's all contributing to this sense that I'm entering a just completely new chapter, a completely undiscovered territory in my life, and I just have no idea how to prepare for it all. But I will say, I am taking it a day at a time. I'm you know, keeping mindful and you know, staying very, very in touch with feelings of gratitude and joy and excitement, and just kind of seeing what's next.
Yeah, you've been preparing for it your whole life.
I guess so. I guess so. Be
One
careful
last,
what you wish for.
be careful what you wish for sure. You know, before I let you go, I do want to ask you, you mentioned Kim's Convenience.
Hmm.
There were a lot of stories about the cast of that show feeling that their characters were often misrepresented by the almost entirely white writers' room. As a young actor who, of course, wants to work, how do you manage the obligations to speak up in those situations more generally as you step into the room? And in many instances, maybe you're the only Asian American person or man in the room.
Hmm. It's extremely isolating. And I think when the power dynamic is that you are, yeah, you are just an actor, and the culture of your production is such that, you know, it doesn't feel safe for the actor to kind of voice his or her concerns, or to escalate things, to have to maintain an open dialogue with the writers room. It can be very, very frustrating and very difficult. You know, I remember the day that I got cast, actually, the day that I got that call from Kevin Feige, I was in a fight with a producer earlier on in the day, shooting, an episode of the show. I was trying to kill a joke that I thought was racially insensitive, and I was met with. I just remember feeling so incredibly alone because, I was just not being backed up, and I just felt totally unsupported and isolated, and it's really I really just think it goes back to the culture, and it's so important, especially when you're doing a show about this family that belongs to a visible minority group, that you have either the people in place that understand that perspective and can speak and write about it, or you have open channels of communication so that the performers who have lived that experience are able to give their ideas. And I will say on this movie, first of all, Destin Daniel Cretton, Dave Callahan, fantastic Asian American storytellers. But we were given the opportunity to voice our thoughts, our concerns, and shape the creative of the story.
Simu Liu stars in the new film Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Simu, this was a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.